In Genesis 15 verse 6, it was counted, the word chasab in the Hebrew. It was counted. Abraham believed, and it was, the word counted is the word chasab, C-H-A-S-A-B. In that singular verse, he brings in a whole lot of what is in the epistles today. That Hebrews chapter 15 verse 6. Abraham believed in the Lord and it was counted. Notice, Abraham believed. Abraham the father. Abraham believed. Abraham the father. So a play of words, no doubt, where he stands instead as a prefiguring of what God will do in Christ. So Abraham is a prefigure of what God will do in Christ. Watch this. Abraham believed, then reckoned. Reckoned. Now, who wrote that Abraham believed and the word reckoned? Who wrote it? Moses. It was accounted. Chasab. It means to think of. Chasab means to think of and to put down as. To think of and to put down as. Accounted. Notice that all he did was to believe. It was E.W. Kenyon that first called my attention back then that Abraham's believing was for a lack of words. Then he says it actually means an unqualified committal. That what Abraham did was not just belief. That belief is too weak a word. That what Abraham did was an unqualified committal. That is, you are not responding to anything but the faithfulness of God alone. Unqualified committal. Moses is saying that Abraham believing there means he trusted in God's promise. And this was reckoned as righteousness. He trusted in God's promise. And that trust in the promise of God was reckoned as righteousness. That is to think of or to account. Because he trusted in God's promise, he was thought of, or it was accounted to him as righteousness. Now, a similar place where the same statements was used is in Psalm 106 verse 30. Then stood up Phinehas and executed judgment, and so the plague was stayed. Next verse. And that was counted unto him for righteousness, unto all generations forevermore. Phinehas. Take note of that, Phinehas. That it was counted, the word chasab will be our key word. Counted. It means to think of or to treat as righteous. To think of or to treat as righteousness. So we have the key words. Let's go back to Genesis 15 verse 6. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. We have believed. The word believed is the word aman in the Hebrew. It means to abandon yourself to another for what he will do. To abandon yourself to another for what he will do. It can be about Isaac. It will only be life from the dead. Life from the dead. Because that unqualified committal has to be a promise. The reason why the Hebrew writer wrote that, they saw themselves as pilgrims and strangers. Hebrews 11. They saw themselves as pilgrims and strangers, not having received the promise, they died. The reason why the writer of Hebrews wrote that was because it was an unqualified committal. That is, it will be to look. You have no say. The only place where Abraham will not be able to exercise anything will be in death. He will have to trust God's promise when he is dead. I believe, I have not seen. I'm going to die. I have not seen. I trust even in death. Do you understand? Unqualified committal. So that is an unqualified committal. By being live from the dead, you are dead, but your trust is alive. You are dead, but your faith is alive. You trusted even at the point of death. It therefore brings to mind what happened to Adam. In that day you will surely die. Now, in Numbers chapter 25 verse 7 to 8 and 11 to 12, you can read at home about Phinehas. We read Phinehas just a few minutes ago. Numbers chapter 25 verse 7 to 8 and verse 11 to 12. It says that action of Phinehas was counted to him for righteousness. That action of Phinehas. What happened? The people, as it were, broke God's commandment or God's covenant in that scenario. By what Phinehas did, he stayed the plague and restored it. By the action of Phinehas. Why are those things similar? It appears that Moses is saying Adam's deed has been corrected in Abraham. Yeah. What Moses is saying was that Adam's deed, or what Adam did, has been corrected in Abraham. Now pay attention. If you miss here, you shouldn't have even heard anything I said. This is now righteousness, sadaka in the Hebrew. Now we will come to sadaka, to do it justly. Sadaka, to do it justly, to put it right. That is, what was done has now been corrected. It's beautiful, right? Why did he just chasab? Because you won't see that chasab till the resurrection of Christ. Unqualified committal. But at this point, it is accounted as so. Even though it is yet to happen. So Abraham will be treated like a man raised from the dead. He has not risen from the dead yet, or he has not been raised from the dead, but accounted will mean he will be treated like a man that has been raised from the dead. Righteous. He will be so treated, even though the promise is in the resurrection. So therefore, by saying, in thy seed shall all the nations be blessed, that is righteousness. It has been made right. What was said in Genesis has now been corrected. No, restored or made right. Not just corrected. It's been restored or made right. It's still future, but then in the action of Abraham, we see it already accounted. So that means the nation in Genesis 1:26 and 28, that nation is the same nation that is now found in the faith of Abraham, and it has been put right. And how is this done? By unqualified abandonment to believe. Unqualified abandonment to believe. So what is restored? What is renewed? The promise of God in Genesis 1:26. In our image, in our likeness, replenish the earth, multiply, be fruitful, The same thing that was said is now re-emphasized in Abraham. Now, so the physical circumcision of Genesis 17:11 will be a demonstration of what had happened in Genesis 15 verse 6 or Genesis 12, where Paul now argues that Abraham was justified before he was physically circumcised. In other words, faith can be demonstrated without a single ceremony. You don't need a faith extender. Faith is enough without any single ceremony. So read backwards and think. Read backwards. Remember, nations were mentioned in Genesis chapter 1. All the earth. Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 11. Also, Genesis 3 and 11. Nations were mentioned. All the earth. You will see in Genesis chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 6, chapter 11, there was always the earth. All the nations. One language. But it was now fully explained in Abraham's activity. So notice that the essence of nations stopped with Abraham. The moment Abraham showed forth, the essence of nations stopped. And then it appears that only one single nation was spoken of after Abraham showed up. We were no more talking of nations. We were talking about a nation. So the essence of nations was to arrive at explaining a nation. That's the essence of nations. A restoration, a renewal of God's promise that in the man who is made in the image of God, the man who is made in the image of God, that the man who is made in Genesis 1:26 and 28, that man, in him will all the nations be blessed. How? Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, have dominion, all in the image of God. The Selem, Hebrew, the Eikon, Greek, image, the imprint of God on man. So Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is therefore corrected in Abraham's faith. That is, in the faith of Abraham, we see the hope of the accomplishment of what God spoke in Genesis 1, which in Adam, that hope was gone. So there's a restoration of that faith in Abraham. So that is why Moses' Sabbath was to remind them what was said in Adam. Moses' Sabbath in Genesis chapter 2 verse 1 to 3. So in Genesis chapter 15 verse 6, Sadaka, which is where we have righteousness. It means just and proper. Something that is just and proper. Sadaka, righteousness. We see righteousness not just as a gift, but we see righteousness as what God did. What God did. So God is now just, God is now proper, because God has done the proper thing.